The rain had not stopped in days, turning the city's alleys into rivers of filth and regret. Elena stood beneath a flickering street lamp, drenched trench coat clinging to her tall frame. Her eyes, once bright with idealism, now burned cold with purpose. A whisper echoed in her earpiece. "They took him." Her breath caught for just a second. "Then they'll answer," Elena said, her voice like gravel dragged across metal. Across the street, behind cracked warehouse glass, shadows moved. She reached inside her coat, fingers grazing the hilt of her blade, not for comfort, but for certainty. The city had betrayed her, cost her everything. But tonight, it would remember her. Lightning cracked, revealing her scarred jawline. "I am not broken," Elena whispered. "I am the reckoning." With a final breath, she stepped forward into the dark. This was no longer about justice. This was vengeance reborn. The warehouse was colder than the street, lined with rusted machinery and stale air thick with oil. Elena moved like a shadow, blade gliding along her thigh. Her boots didn't echo. She knew how to hunt. In the distance, a chair creaked. She stepped closer. A man sat bound and bruised, blood smeared across his cheek. His eyes locked onto hers. "Elena," he whispered. "They said you were dead." She crouched, cut his bonds. Not dead, just sharpened. She scanned the room. No guards. Too easy. "They wanted me to find you," she muttered. And as the overhead bulb buzzed louder, she knew this was just the beginning. Outside, the street felt too quiet. Elena scanned rooftops as they emerged, her pistol drawn. The rescued man limped beside her. "They watched everything," he muttered. She nodded. "And they'll follow." A car idled nearby. Black windows tinted. Elena pushed him behind a dumpster just as gunfire cracked the silence. She returned fire without blinking. Shells clattered on wet asphalt. "Who did you talk to?" she demanded. "I told no one," he swore. She believed him. For now. "Me." Sirens in the distance wailed louder. "Time's up," she said, pulling him toward the fire escape. The city wasn't done bleeding tonight. High above the city, Elena knelt on a rooftop, breath misting in the cold. The man slept nearby, wrapped in her coat. Her gaze scanned the neon glow below. "They're hunting silence," she said softly. "But I speak loud enough." She pulled a weathered photo from her pocket. 3 faces. Smiling. Gone. A whisper of grief flickered. Then her expression hardened. "You think you broke me?" she asked the skyline. "You made me sharper." A low drone buzzed past. Surveillance. She ducked. This wasn't hiding. It was waiting. And soon, the city would feel the blade it forged. Dawn was gray, stained with soot. Elena led the man through broken streets toward a safe house, past boarded stores and ash-blown alleyways. "You owe me truth," she said. He hesitated. "They're building something, underground." Her eyes narrowed. "Weapons." He shook his head. "Worse. Belief." Her steps slowed. This wasn't just a vendetta. It was a war of ideas, of control. She looked ahead. Smoke curled from an abandoned church. "Then we burn it down," she whispered. Behind them, the city stirred. But Elena was already rewriting its rules. And the next chapter began with fire. The safe house was deep underground, buried beneath an old transit tunnel. Elena moved fast, guiding the wounded man down, rusted metal stairs slick with condensation. "Stay alert. They always send ghosts before the wolves," she warned. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life, revealing a narrow bunker lined with maps, screens, and empty ammo crates. He sank into a chair, wincing. "They're watching everything." Elena tapped a monitor. "So am I." Her fingers danced across keyboards. Files, surveillance feeds, coded transcripts. It all pulsed in monochrome green. "This system, it's not just tracking criminals," she said. "It's making them." A face appeared on screen. Hers. Elena narrowed her eyes. Time to erase the author. Outside, the streets buzzed with tension. Posters bearing Elena's face labeled "Traitor" and "Wanted" were plastered everywhere. She moved among crowds with her hood drawn, watching security drones drift overhead. "They've rewritten the narrative," she muttered, "and they're making people believe it." She handed a child a ration bar and smiled faintly. A woman nearby whispered, "You look like her." Elena leaned close. "Maybe I am. Maybe she's the one trying to save you." She vanished into the crowd. The lie was louder than truth, but she was fire in the shadows. And the city still had dry kindling left. Deep in the lower district, Elena met with a contact, the hacker known only as Hex. They spoke behind tinted glass in a freight elevator stuck between floors. "You want the spine of the system," Hex said. "That'll cost." Elena handed over a flash drive. "Evidence, enough to collapse them." Hex plugged it into a jack at his wrist. "You just gave them your signature, you know." Elena smirked. "I gave them bait." As the elevator creaked and sparks danced from old wiring, Hex's eyes widened. "You're not trying to hide anymore." Elena nodded. "No, I'm dragging them into the light." The trap was set. Elena broadcasted the evidence through pirate radio, across rooftops, through sewer lines, encoded into power grids. Truth became static in every ear. "Let them chase ghosts," she whispered. Riot squads descended on abandoned alleys, chasing echoes. But Elena was already gone. "They're panicking," said the man at her side. Elena watched the horizon burn red. "Good. Now they know fear." Civilians gathered where screens lit up with leaked footage. Executions, bribes, false trials. "They won't ignore this," he said. Elena replied, "They'll try, but you can't unsee justice." And with that, the city took a breath. By nightfall, the city cracked. Sirens screamed endlessly. Barricades fell. Civilians took to the streets, not in chaos, but in demand. Elena stood atop a bus, voice projected through jury-rigged speakers. "They stole your rights, branded you criminals. I was one of you. I still am." She pointed to the sky. "We don't need them to tell us what justice is. We define it now." The crowd roared, a storm of unity. The man beside her said, "They'll come harder now." Elena smiled, fire reflecting in her eyes. "Then we'll burn brighter." She looked over the sea of faces. For the first time, the abyss blinked. The morning after the uprising was eerily quiet. Smoke curled from broken buildings, and the streets were littered with shattered glass and torn banners. Elena walked through the aftermath like a soldier among ghosts. "We struck the beast," she said softly, "but it still breathes." Children swept ash from doorways while parents rebuilt stalls. From a rooftop, a sniper watched her. She turned without fear, stared straight up. "You've got a choice," she whispered. "Like we all do." The sniper's scope didn't move. A bird landed beside him. He blinked, then lowered the rifle. Elena moved on. Yet even silent revolutions could change hearts. In a forgotten underground station, resistance leaders gathered. Elena faced them under a flickering ceiling light. "We started this," she said. "We finish it, or we die as symbols, not soldiers." A grizzled veteran slammed a fist on the table. "We're not ready." Elena stepped closer. "They're more afraid now than we've ever been." Murmurs rippled. A young woman raised her hand. "What if we lose?" Elena nodded. "Then we lose with purpose." Silence fell. Then, one by one, hands were raised in agreement. No vote. Just commitment. In that moment, they weren't rebels. They were the architects of judgment. The government struck back fast. Armored patrols returned to the streets, scanning faces, detaining civilians. Elena moved like smoke, here, gone, reappearing miles away. In one square, she helped a teenager escape through a sewer hatch. "Tell your mother you're free because someone stood up," she said. Sirens blared behind them. Elena turned and vanished into the alley. Word spread that she was in 3 places at once. A myth. A warning. A promise. Even when the regime jammed broadcasts, her voice echoed in graffiti, in whispers, in courage. She's not hiding, people said. She's hunting. In a hidden chamber beneath a ruined library, Elena found the last piece, a ledger of names. Every operative, every puppet judge, every bribe. She ran her fingers across the brittle pages. Truth has weight, she whispered. Outside, she could hear boots on broken stone. They're coming, said the old historian. Elena handed him the book. Then you go. Get it out. The man hesitated. And you? Elena pulled a weapon from her belt. I stay, I buy you time. The door cracked. Dust rained from the ceiling. The past was about to collide with its architects. Elena was ready. Gunfire ripped through stone as soldiers breached the library ruins. Elena moved between cover like a whisper, firing only when cornered. She wasn't fighting to win, only to delay. Time stretched. Sweat mixed with dust. Then, silence. Smoke. A soldier approached her prone body, only to find a decoy jacket and a flashbang. She was gone. In another city sector, the historian emerged from shadows, handing the ledger to waiting hands. This will break them, someone said. The old man replied, it already has. Back beneath the rubble, Elena crawled through a drainage tunnel, bruised but alive. Justice had escaped with her. They called it the Day of Erosion. The regime's walls, once proud, impenetrable, were stained with paint, fire, and fury. Elena stood on a rooftop, overlooking the chaos, voice steady in a pirated broadcast. You see smoke. I see awakening. Her signal beamed into hidden radios, prison blocks, even inside enemy barracks. They hid behind laws written in blood. Now we write new ones. On the street below, protesters marched with stolen shields and chants like thunder. She turned to her tech, nodded once. Cut transmission. Then silence. But her words had already taken flight. A traitor's face flickered across public screens. Councilman Devrin, the man who once stood beside Elena. She has betrayed the peace, he declared. But behind closed doors, Devrin paced. He knew she had the ledger. He knew what came next. In a secure room, he met with private enforcers. Find her, or everything burns. But paranoia made him reckless. Even his guards whispered. In the resistance, Elena reviewed the footage. He's scared, she said. Scared men make mistakes. She smiled for the first time in days. The reckoning would come, not through force, but through truth bleeding in daylight. Rain swept through the industrial zone like a baptism. Elena met an old ally beneath a rusted overpass. Armin, once thought dead. He handed her a drive. Backup of the ledger, encrypted. She hugged him like a ghost from another life. I thought I lost you. Armand smiled faintly. You almost did. A drone buzzed overhead, scanning. They ducked behind barrels. We need to move, Elena said. No, Armand replied. You go, I'll draw them. Before she could object, he was gone. Moments later, gunfire echoed. Elena ran with the drive clenched in her fist. The past was dying to protect the future. The data was decrypted. The names, judges, bankers, generals, filled the screen like a map of rot. Elena stood before the core resistance circle. We expose them all. No more masks. One elder rebel shook his head. If we do this, it's war. Elena met his eyes. It already is. They activated the broadcast link, hijacking every major feed. Around the city, screens bled names and crimes. People stopped, watched, whispered. Soldiers laid down arms. Some wept. Truth, once buried, had surfaced like a storm. There was no going back. That night, statues fell. not by bombs but by rope and will. Crowds surged through city squares, pulling down monuments to liars. Elena stood among them, unrecognized, hood pulled low. She didn't cheer. She watched. Tears blurred her vision, not of sadness but of disbelief. The regime's voice was silent. For the first time, justice didn't come from a bullet, but from collective breath. A woman beside her whispered, "We're not afraid anymore." Elena said nothing. She didn't need to. The city spoke for her. The city's heartbeat changed overnight. Where fear once clung to the walls, there was now purpose. Community kitchens rose where checkpoints once stood. Elena walked through a former military compound turned shelter. Children played in empty cell blocks. "This was a place of silence," she said. "Now it sings." Volunteers handed out blankets. Others painted over regime insignias with bright murals. An elder tapped her shoulder. "You're her, aren't you?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. The woman embraced her. "Thank you, child. We thought we'd never breathe again." Elena didn't speak. Her eyes did. Justice didn't come like thunder. It came like healing. But the empire above was not dead. From the capital's ivory towers, the remaining ministers assembled. We underestimated the infection," one hissed. Another responded, "Then we burn the host." A black directive was signed, Project Purge. It was not war. It was erasure. Drones were deployed. Files deleted. Witnesses vanished. The regime didn't fight in the open anymore. It dissolved truth with silence. Elena received the warning too late. A warehouse base was gone. No bodies. Just ash. She clenched her fists. So they still believe they can rewrite history. She turned to her team. "Then we give them something they can't erase." Elena moved faster than memory. Hidden couriers carried flash drives sewn into coats. Students projected exposés onto skyscrapers. Hackers hijacked satellites to beam truth across borders. "This is no longer a rebellion," said Elena into a cracked mic. "This is reclamation." Her voice traveled in whispers and banners, across prison walls and cafe napkins. The regime scrambled, but the signal outpaced their reach. For every story they buried, 5 more bloomed. And always, her face somewhere unseen, always watching. They had tried to silence a spark. Instead they'd lit a wildfire. Inside a darkened cathedral, once a shrine to the state, Elena stood beneath stained glass fractured by conflict. Her voice echoed through the empty pews. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to build despite what was broken. Her allies knelt behind her, not in worship, but respect. This was their last gathering before the final march. She looked at each face. The tired, the hopeful, the haunted. Tomorrow we don't fight for revenge. We fight so no one else has to. And in that quiet place, where even God had fled, humanity returned. Not through prayer, but through promise. Dawn arrived like a drumbeat. In the streets, the people emerged, thousands strong. No weapons. Just voices. Elena stood at the front, no armor, only truth. "Today we walk forward," she said. "Not to destroy what's left, but to claim what was stolen." A child handed her a flower. She placed it behind her ear. Then, step by step, they advanced. The regime soldiers waited, nervous, unsure. Orders barked in earpieces faded under the roar of chants. One soldier dropped his rifle. Then, another. Elena didn't speak. She walked. And behind her, justice marched on 2 million feet. The palace gates fell not to siege, but to stillness. No banners waved. No orders screamed. The silence was its own kind of thunder. Elena entered first, alone. Marble halls loomed around her, etched with the lies of a fallen era. Statues of tyrants watched her pass, cracked, blind, irrelevant. In the throne chamber she found him. The chancellor. Older than rumor, thin as decay. "You," he rasped. Elena didn't draw her weapon. Me, she said. The one your reports never saw coming. He reached for a pistol. She didn't flinch. This isn't justice by bullet, she said. It's justice by truth. He collapsed to his knees, trembling. For the first time in decades, the seat of power witnessed humility. The world outside erupted, not in violence but celebration. Bells rang from towers long silent. Prison doors creaked open, and those once forgotten stepped into sunlight. Families reunited without words. On a rooftop, a young girl painted a mural of Elena's face beside the word, dared. In the markets, free hands built again. Elena stood at the balcony, watching the rebirth. We didn't win a war, she whispered. We reclaimed our breath. Beside her, former fighters laughed, not warriors anymore, just people. And in that breath, the city became something else, not perfect but possible. In a quiet basement where plans were once drawn, Elena addressed her inner circle one last time. The revolution was never about me, she said. It was about the choice we make every day, to stand, even when alone. Her allies listened. A teacher, a coder, a poet, a former soldier. We returned power to the people, not to fill the throne, but to dismantle it. Papers were passed. Transition plans. Citizen councils. No one raised their voice. There was no victory speech. Only responsibility. As the candle burned low, Elena smiled faintly. Let them write stories of us, but let truth be louder. The regime's archives, long buried beneath concrete and denial, were finally opened. Rows of files. Names. Photos. Dead. Voices lost to time. Elena walked the halls with survivors and families. A mother found a photo of her missing son. A teacher recognized the signature of a student turned dissident. Tears flowed, but not from despair, from recognition. Truth isn't punishment, Elena said. It's release. Each page turned was another link restored. History began to breathe again, not as myth, but as memory. In silence, the nation began to understand itself. Elena returned to the alley where it all began. The walls still bore the scorch marks. The ground still remembered blood. She stood alone, breathing it all in. Not every ending is peace, she said softly. But it is quiet. A girl approached. A stranger. She held out a camera. Tell me how it started, the child asked. Elena smiled. It started with a question no one wanted to ask. What if we're not powerless? The girl clicked the photo. A moment captured. Not for history books. For the next question to begin. Years passed, but the echoes remained. Children learned Elena's name not through legend, but lesson. In classrooms once filled with doctrine, now hung murals of choice, defiance, and truth. A young boy stood before a photo of the revolution's start and asked, was she afraid? The teacher, once a silent protester, answered, ah yes, and that's what made her brave. Elena walked anonymously among markets, her face unrecognized by most, but remembered by the land itself. This was no statue's legacy. It was one of seed and soil, of choices repeated in quieter ways. She watched a woman vote for the first time. That was the story now. The council chamber stood where the old palace once loomed. A skeleton repurposed into a living heart. No podiums. No balconies. Just a circle of wooden chairs, worn and equal. Elena entered silently and sat in the back, her coat dusty from the road, her voice resting after years of fire. Members argued, not with fists, but with thought. A young delegate raised his voice. But what if we disagree forever? An older woman replied, then we listen forever. Elena's former comrade, Thomas, spotted her. He crossed the room, eyes warm. You built this, you could lead again. Elena shook her head gently. It's theirs now. I'll just watch. She closed her eyes briefly as the debate continued. The chamber wasn't perfect, far from it. But it pulsed with effort, not orders. The air carried heat from words, not bombs. There was no anthem blaring outside, just the hum of commerce, the murmur of children. For the first time, justice had no capital letter. Just people, imperfect and willing. They built the museum inside the old train station where Elena once fled as a fugitive. Now, light poured through repaired glass panes onto exhibits made not of trophies, but of truths. One room had no plaques, no commentary, just sound. Survivors' voices filled the air, shaky testimonies, breathless confessions, the unedited pulse of pain and perseverance. On one wall hung Elena's coat, faded, torn at the collar, still stained with smoke. Not behind a gilded frame, just nailed to raw wood. A teenage girl sat sketching it, her brows furrowed in reverence. A man nearby whispered to his daughter, "She wore that when they tried to kill her." Elena watched from the corner, her hat low. A curator approached softly. "You don't want credit?" Elena replied, "This isn't credit. This is memory." On the coat's tag someone had scribbled, "Property of everyone." It was not an artifact. It was a seed. The city faded behind her, a horizon of twinkling lights and living breaths. Elena reached the top of a hill she once ran to for safety, now returned to by choice. She sat in the tall grass, fingers grazing dew-tipped blades. Above, stars blanketed the sky in the same arrangement as they had on the night she chose to resist. But tonight, there were no signals to intercept, no coordinates to transmit. Just silence. A breeze lifted her hair gently. "It was never about winning," she said aloud, her voice soft, certain. "It was about waking up." Somewhere below, a child laughed. A guitar played faintly. She lay back against the earth, her spine relaxed for the first time in years. A butterfly, small and pale, landed on her hand and didn't flee. She smiled. She had roared, yes. "But now," she whispered, and the world heard her still. No one saw her leave. At sunrise her home stood as if she had just stepped out to the well. But everything essential had gone. Her boots, her notebook, the final drive. On the table sat one item, a book bound in plain cloth, its title hand-inked, "When the People Breathe." The final page read, in unmistakable script, "Keep going." Neighbors searched the hills, the markets, the rivers. Rumors spread. Elena had joined a monastery, started a new rebellion, vanished into the mountains. But the truth was better. She had passed the torch and stepped into the dark. Her legend was not sealed in gold, but carried in lips that still dared to speak. A mural bloomed weeks later, her silhouette watching over a field of raised hand. And beneath it, one line written by an unknown child. She became the story.